The door creaked open in the middle of the night. A woman woke up to the sound of heavy footsteps in her home. Before she could move, she saw a tall, thin man step out of the shadows. His eyes looked wild, his teeth yellow, and he raised a gun at her. The stranger smiled like he enjoyed her fear. In the quiet of the dark house, he whispered, "Don't scream." This was Richard Ramirez. This was the moment Los Angeles learned the name, the Night Stalker. The crimes he committed were brutal, the kind of evil that left people afraid to even close their eyes at night. Windows were locked, doors were bolted, and yet he still found his way in. The city was frozen in fear because no one knew who he was or where he would strike next. And now he was inside this woman's home. What happened in that house would terrify not just her family, but the whole country. But how did it all begin? How did Richard Ramirez become the monster who walked the streets of California at night, breaking into homes and bringing terror wherever he went? To understand his reign of terror, we must go back to where his story began. Richard Ramirez was born in El Paso, Texas, in 1960. His family was poor, and his father was strict and often angry. As a boy, Richard struggled in school. He was shy and quiet, but there was something about him that seemed unsettled. He often had seizures, and kids made fun of him. By the time he was a teenager, he had already started drifting away from the normal path most kids his age followed. He spent a lot of time with his older cousin, Miguel, who had fought in the Vietnam War. Instead of teaching Richard about good things, Miguel showed him terrible pictures from the war, people who had been hurt, lives destroyed. These images left a mark on Richard's young mind. Miguel also bragged about violent things he had done overseas, and Richard listened closely. What should have been lessons of horror became lessons of fascination for him. Things got even worse one day when Richard actually witnessed Miguel shoot his wife during an argument. Richard was there when it happened. He saw the blood, the chaos, and the life leave her body. For most kids, that moment would have been horrifying enough to change them forever. But for Richard, it pushed him further down a dark path. He became colder, more distant, and he began to show signs of enjoying the thought of violence. As Richard grew older, he started experimenting with drugs, skipping school, and sneaking into people's homes. Not to steal large amounts, but just the thrill of it. The act of breaking into a place where he didn't belong gave him excitement. It was like practice for the horrors that were yet to come. By the time he moved to California in his early 20s, Richard was already becoming the person people would one day call the Night Stalker. Los Angeles in the 1980s was a place of glamour, sunshine, and wealth, but also of poverty, crime, and shadows. The city was alive at night, and Richard felt at home in that darkness. At first, his crimes were smaller: car theft, burglary, drugs. But Richard wanted more. He was searching for a kind of power, something that made him feel in control. And soon, his crimes would grow darker and more terrifying. The first murder linked to him happened in 1984. A 79-year-old woman named Jenny Vincow was found dead in her Los Angeles apartment. She had been stabbed and her body left in a way that shocked investigators. At first, the police had no idea who could do such a thing. But for Richard, this was just the beginning. Months later, the attacks became more frequent, and always at night. People started hearing stories of men who entered homes while families were asleep, a man who seemed to vanish into the darkness after leaving chaos behind. He didn't seem to care who the victims were: young, old, men, women, rich, poor. Anyone could be next. That was what made him even more terrifying. The newspapers gave him a name, the Night Stalker. And that name stuck, because that's exactly what he did. He stalked the night, waiting for the right moment to strike. People in Los Angeles began living in fear. Hardware stores sold out of locks, and families slept with the lights on. But Richard Ramirez wasn't finished. He wanted the world to know his name. He wanted people to fear him. And soon, he would strike again, louder, bolder, and more violent than before. One summer night in 1985, a couple slept peacefully in their home in Monterey Park, just outside Los Angeles. The window was slightly open, letting in the warm night air. They didn't hear the footsteps. They didn't see the shadow slip into their room. Richard Ramirez was inside. He was armed, and he was ready. The couple never had a chance to wake fully before Richard Ramirez made his move. The husband opened his eyes to see a man standing over the bed, pointing a gun straight at his head. In seconds, the sound of a gunshot cracked through the room. The man collapsed, bleeding, while his wife screamed in horror. Richard turned toward her, his face lit up by the faint glow of the streetlight outside. His teeth were crooked, his hair wild, his eyes almost empty, like he wasn't fully human. He had no mercy. This was one of the Night Stalker's most terrifying attacks. He didn't just break into homes to steal. He broke in to take lives and spread fear. And this was only one of many nights where Los Angeles would wake up to news of death in their neighborhoods. The city that once felt safe was now living in constant terror. Police officers rushed to the crime scene. They were stunned by the violence and how quickly it had happened. There were no clear fingerprints, no solid clues, nothing that could lead them directly to the killer. But what scared them even more was the randomness of it all. Richard wasn't targeting only one type of victim. He attacked men and women, young and old. No one was safe. The news spread fast. Local television stations warned people to lock their doors and close their windows. But fear filled the city because Richard always found a way in. People bought extra locks, guard dogs, even guns, hoping to protect themselves. But still, the Night Stalker kept striking. Some nights, Richard would take jewelry or cash after his attacks. But that wasn't what he really wanted. He was after power, control, and fear. He wanted his victims to see his face, to remember his evil grin. In his twisted mind, he felt unstoppable. Detectives tried to piece together the crimes. The killings had strange patterns. Sometimes he used a gun, other times a knife. Sometimes he attacked couples, other times people who lived alone. It made him nearly impossible to track. To the police, it looked like the work of several different criminals. But it was all Richard. For months, the Night Stalker kept the city trapped in fear. He drove around at night, looking for open windows, unlocked doors, or just a chance to slip inside a home while people slept. He was like a shadow moving through the city. One of his most terrifying traits was how unpredictable he was. Victims who survived told stories of him demanding strange things, speaking about dark powers, and leaving behind chilling words. The randomness made him even harder to stop. It felt like he could appear anywhere at any time and do anything. By now, the newspapers were printing headlines almost every week about new attacks. Richard had turned into a ghost story that was actually real. Families sat together at dinner tables whispering about him. Neighbors formed watch groups. People jumped at every noise outside their windows at night. But as the fear spread, so did the determination to catch him. Police worked around the clock, piecing together small details, hoping one mistake from Ramirez would finally reveal who he was. Still, for every clue, there seemed to be two more mysteries. And then came another night. It was August 1985. A family was asleep in their home in Mission Viejo, a quiet neighborhood in Orange County. Richard had spotted the house earlier and waited until the lights went out. The streets were silent, the air warm, and the only sound was a hum of crickets in the distance. Richard crept to a window and slipped inside, moving through the house like he had done so many times before. He carried his gun, his knife, and the same cold look in his eyes. He stepped into the bedroom where the family slept. He raised his weapon. And then a sound. Someone in the neighborhood had seen a strange car outside and called the police. Red and blue lights flashed across the street. Sirens screamed in the distance, coming closer. Richard froze, his plans suddenly interrupted. For the first time in months, the hunter was at risk of being hunted. The flashing lights grew brighter as the sirens screamed closer. Richard Ramirez slipped back through the window, his heart racing. He sprinted to his stolen car, jumped inside, and sped off into the night. But in his panic, he made a mistake, one that would help bring him down. As he tore out of the neighborhood, a sharp-eyed witness wrote down the license plate number of his car. For the first time, the police had something solid. It wasn't just another shadow disappearing into the dark. This time, the Night Stalker had left a trail. When investigators ran the plate, they discovered the car was stolen. But inside that car, when it was later found abandoned, police recovered something important, a fingerprint. Finally, after months of fear and countless sleepless nights for families across California, they had a real clue that could tie the crimes together. The print matched Richard Ramirez, a 25-year-old drifter with a history of burglary, drug use, and violence. The Night Stalker now had a name, and for the first time, the people of Los Angeles could picture who had been haunting their city. Police released his picture to the press, and it spread across newspapers and TV screens almost instantly. The face that had lurked in the shadows was now in the light. His wild black hair, sunken cheeks, and piercing eyes stared back at millions of terrified viewers. The city held its breath. Some felt relief. Finally, he had been identified. But others felt even more fear. If Richard saw his own face on the news, he would know the police were closing in. What would he do next? Richard, meanwhile, was on the run. He didn't know yet that his picture was everywhere. He hopped on a bus in Los Angeles, planned to head to Arizona to see his brother. But when he stepped off the bus in East L.A., he noticed people staring. A woman whispered to her friend. A man picked up a newspaper with Richard's face printed on the front page. At first, Richard tried to stay calm. He ducked into a convenience store, grabbed a soda, and glanced around. But then he saw it clearly, his own mugshot staring back at him from a rack of newspapers. Above his face, the headline read, "Night Stalker Identified." Panic rushed through him. He dropped the soda and bolted out of the store, his long legs carrying him down the busy street. He pushed past people, looking for an escape. But the city that had once cowered in fear of him now turned against him. Neighbors recognized him. Someone shouted, "That's him! That's the Night Stalker." In seconds, the quiet street exploded into chaos. People ran after him, shouting, pointing, chasing. Richard sprinted through alleys, trying to escape, but more and more people joined the chase. For the first time, he wasn't the hunter. He was the hunted. He ran across a yard, tried to pull a man's car door open, but the man fought him off. He ran again, but fists started flying. A group of neighbors cornered him, dragging him to the ground. They kicked, punched, and held him down, refusing to let the Night Stalker escape. Richard Ramirez, who had once made an entire city sleep with lights on, was now bleeding and powerless under the hands of ordinary people. The police arrived moments later, sirens wailing, and found him beaten and pinned to the ground by the very community he had once terrorized. As officers handcuffed him and pulled him to his feet, the crowd cheered. Relief swept through the neighborhood. The reign of terror was finally over. But even though Richard Ramirez had been caught, the nightmare wasn't finished yet. The trial that followed would shock the nation all over again, filled with strange outbursts, dark symbols, and words from Ramirez himself that made people question just how evil a person could be.